Hi, my name is Riley Woodring and I will be doing my final government project on foreign trade. In this presentation, I will be discussing what foreign trade is, its importance, how it affects national income, the different organizations that affect foreign trade in the United States, as well as how trade works, the policies and regulations involved, and I'll also be touching on the advantages and disadvantages of foreign trade. For the interview portion of my project, I interviewed William Chapis, who is a chief economist of the United States Trade Representatives. So first, what is foreign trade? Foreign trade is the exchange of capital, goods, and services across international borders. There are three main types of trade that every country takes part of. The first kind is imports. Import is the word used for overseas goods that are received from another country. The opposite of import is export. Export is when one country sends domestic goods to another country. The last type of trade is entrepot. Entrepot is the re-exporting of goods that were originally imported from another country. Foreign trade is a very important concept in today's world, and there are many reasons for its importance. One reason is price. Some goods and services can be acquired more cheaply from producers overseas. Another reason is quality. Goods and services from other countries could be more superior than those same goods and services from another country. An example of this is Scottish wine, which is viewed on the bottom right picture. Availability is another reason, and is important because some resources are impossible to obtain domestically, such as some fruits or minerals. Japan is an example of this because it has no natural oil reserves. Demand is last. If a country cannot produce enough goods or services fast enough, it has to acquire them from a different source. The national income is something that every country keeps track of. Foreign trade is a huge factor in national income, so in turn it is also taken with care. From the perspective of the national product and national income, exports are considered to be of use of domestically created national product, and imports as a resource. Within the framework of trade, foreign currency, and credit policy, the higher the value of exports, the higher the utilization of resources created domestically. On the other hand, the higher the value of the imports, the higher the value of external resources entering the country. However, their value is then increased further by domestic production and trade of that same product that was imported. Back to national income. Here is a slide of the balance of the exchange in national income. It is considered bad if the value of domestic resources is higher than the value of imported resources. It is considered good if the value of imported goods is higher than the domestic resources. In this case, there is an increase in national income. It represents a good utilization of the nation's income because the country now has greater resources from abroad at its disposal. There are many different organizations and groups that contribute to foreign trade and how it is run. The main organization is the WTO, or World Trade Organization. The WTO's goal is to ensure that trade flows as smoothly, predictably, and freely as possible. They do this by negotiating agreements with other countries around the world. As seen on the map, many countries are a part of this organization except for a select few like North Korea. Another very important group is the Office of the United States Trade Representation, or the USTR. This group is responsible for creating foreign trade policy. It was created because Congress wanted a specific agency to focus on policy alone. Currently, it is run by Katherine Tai, who is the first Asian American to run the USTR. The agency is further divided into functional and regional parts. Functional as in agriculture, industrial, and medicinal. Regional as in North America, Europe, Africa. William Chapis is from this organization. In my interview with Mr. Chapis, we talked a lot about foreign trade and how it is made. He told me that every negotiation over foreign trade policy starts with a need. This need is often found through an analysis done over the economy. Once a need to change trade policy is found, meetings between countries are set up. Meetings are held in order to agree upon a set of principles that both countries agree with. After this is completed, then it is up to Congress to pass the policy and set up the agreement. The final step is to implement the policy, which will be implemented in 15 to 20 years. That way it gives companies time to prepare for the shift. The United States is one country that attempts to provide equal trade and opportunity for every country. They do this by not participating in sweetheart deals. Sweetheart deals are where a country keeps up barriers on products they produce, but not on products they don't. This shuts out other countries that may be efficient in producing that product and does not create an equal playing field. When creating foreign trade policy, not creating sweetheart deals is just one thing we must take into account. Another thing is following the 2021 trade policy agenda. For the 2021 trade policy agenda, the Biden administration is setting the bar high for trade. The main goal for the planned trade policy is to create a worker-centered trade policy that requires extensive engagement within workers and other worker advocates. Under the Biden administration, trade policy will also encourage domestic investment, innovation, and increase economic security for American families. It will also combat unfair practices by other trading partners. With this agenda, the hope is that foreign trade will better benefit not just companies, but also the everyday American people. Moving on to current policies. The United States has a total of 14 trade agreements with 20 countries that address trade policy. One such agreement is the NAFTA agreement, or the North American Free Trade Agreement. NAFTA was created to eliminate tariff barriers to agriculture, manufacturing, and services, and to remove investment restrictions. This policy was enacted a while ago, but was recently re-established with Trump. Another agreement is the Phase 1 China Agreement. The Phase 1 agreement includes structural reform and other changes to China's economic and trade regime. It also includes a commitment by China to make substantial additional purchases of U.S. goods and services in the coming years. When a country violates a trade agreement or policy, litigation takes place. Litigation is the process of taking legal action, and in the case of foreign trade, legal action usually calls for a third party. Legal action includes some type of compensation. This could include money, goods, or less restrictions on imports. If an agreement or compensation cannot be made, then retaliation occurs. In my interview with Mr. Chapis, he informed me that retaliation is the rebalancing of concessions such as increasing tariffs. Whatever form of retaliation a country decides upon, it will come out as equivalent to the violation that was committed. Currently, we are retaliating against China because they failed their end of the deal. So how does a company even get into the foreign trade? They first must determine if any licenses are needed to overcome regulations. Companies do this by researching what regulations are on their products. To do this, they will look at the Commerce Control List. If their product is on the list, then further research is needed to determine what type of license they need. Research would include how the product is traveling and whom it is going to. If the product is not on the list, it is classified as a EAR99 and doesn't need a license. However, some countries do require a license even if a EAR99 product. Once this is figured out, a company can then apply and obtain their license. When people think of foreign trade, one of the first things they think of is tariffs. A tariff is a tax or duty to be paid on a particular class of imports or exports, and is a huge part of foreign trade. They are paid by the U.S. registered firms to U.S. Customs for their goods they import into the United States. The United States currently has a trade-weighted average imported tariff rate of 2% on industrial goods. The drawback from tariffs is that they damage economic well-being and lead to a net loss in production, jobs, and lower levels of income. Tariffs also tend to burden the lower-income consumers the most. The benefits of tariffs is that they produce revenue on goods and services brought into the country. Tariffs can also serve as an opening point for negotiations between two countries. On the top right graph, we can see the revenue of the United States has made in tariffs. The bottom left graph illustrates the tariff rates compared to other countries. Although all the news talks about is fights breaking out between countries because of trade, there are still plenty of advantages to foreign trade that make it worth putting up with. Trade being comparative is one of these advantages. Comparative advantages allows countries to produce goods and services they are good at. This map shows what each country produces the most. Competition is another advantage because one country may have a monopoly, but when pitted against all other companies in the world, that monopoly is put in its place. This makes sure prices are not too high because there are more sources. The transfer of technology is also an advantage. It allows scientists, engineers, and inventors to make big bounds in their work. Job creation is by far the biggest advantage. In America alone, there is an estimated to be 3 million trade jobs. With advantages, there is also disadvantages to foreign trade. One disadvantage is overdependence. Overdependence increases huge industries around the world. Foreign trade is also unfair to new companies. It is extremely difficult for new companies to get into the market because they will be competing with companies from all around the world. Lastly, a pressure on natural resources is another disadvantage. A country only has limited natural resources, and sharing with other countries would decrease their resources quicker. This is off topic, but in this cartoon we can see third world countries becoming dependent on first world countries like the United States. This is because the aid we are providing is in the form of eggs and rice rather than chicken and seeds. First world countries are giving them products that are already produced rather than the tools to provide for themselves. These are all the sites I use. Most of my information came from websites like the USTR and the Department of Treasury and the WTO sites. I also got quite a bit of information from the 2 JSTOR articles I used, and a lot of information from William Shapis.